Hi, second grade. So today our lesson objective is identify why public transportation became necessary in New York City. So let's explore. What is transportation? Do you know the word transportation? What does it mean? It's a way of traveling from one place to another. So think about that. How do you use transportation? What are some ways that we travel from one place to another in New York City? Think about it. Sometimes you might use more than one thing. Sometimes depending on where you're going or how far it is, you might use more than one thing. Let's brainstorm some of the transportation that we use today in New York City. Taxis, subway, bus, riding a bike, taking the ferry. There's lots of water in New York City. Here's the Staten Island Ferry. That goes from Manhattan to Staten Island. And it's much shorter and easier to go that way, to go all the way around and cross a bridge. So let's think about New York City over time. So here's Manhattan, and the Lenape are here, and they're living, but the buildings aren't as close together, and there's not as many people as there are today. So more and more people start immigrating to New York City. And the buildings and the people start living closer and closer together. And then the buildings start going up because they're running out of space. And then there's more and more people living in New York City. And New York City is coming together like how we know it today. So the city starts having more and more people living in it. And we have to figure out how to get all these people around. So let's look at a primary source, which is a photograph here. And this is Mulberry Street in the 1900s, it says here in the title. Look at how crowded this street is. Look at how tall the buildings are. There's people living higher and higher, so there's many, many more people here. There are people in the street, walking in the street. There's horses pulling carts. Here's a horse. There's a horse. And it's trying to get all these things around town. Very crowded. How do you get there without it taking a really long time? People need transportation to take them from one part of the city to the other. How does the city solve that problem? This is one reason why transportation is so important in New York City, because it's very crowded. Not everybody can have their own horse and their own wagon, then there would be no room. And they also need to bring things around the city, right? So they need things that can carry large objects. So you see here, there's furniture, there's some kind of barrels and sacks of goods here, things that people need. There's all kinds of food. How does that get around? How do they carry that around the city? New York City is always working to find the best way to move many people and goods around at the same time. And that's why it's very, very important for New York City to think about and always come up with best ways to solve this problem so that their transportation is always working. So next lesson, we're going to talk about all the different types of transportation that they've come up with over the years. And we're going to see how they've been solving that problem and still are today. I'll see you next week. Bye, second grade.